in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This is a special edition, our monthly sit down here with Dawson Tire and Wheel. And Dawson Tire and Wheel has been gracious enough to be a member of the Moving Iron Podcast here with the folks at Dawson Tire for going on probably 12 years now. And it's been a great opportunity for me to work with them again with my podcast here. But Dawson Tire and Wheel is your premier ag tire and wheel provider in North America, helping people grow. This month I have Nathan McPherson and Eric McPherson on here. And Nathan is a used tire guy for Dawson Tire and Wheel. He does all the buying and selling, all the used tires that you have out there. So that's one thing that I like about Dawson Tire is that they've got a great selection of used tires out there. So Nathan, welcome to the podcast, and how you been, man?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having us on.
No, man, it's been great.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man, doing good. Eric, thanks for being on the podcast as well, bud.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Casey.
Yes.
Looking forward to doing this again.
Yep, it's going to be a fun time. So, Nathan, why don't you start off a little bit with what it is that you do for Dawson Tire and kind of talk about your process of going through and looking at used tires and how you decide what used tires you want to keep and what used tires you don't want to keep.
Yeah, so we do a lot of tire and wheel combination swaps where, how I like to say it is a dealer in Washington State will get a tractor in with a row crop tire, like an 18.4 480 8050, and they need a skinny tire because they're doing like double row potatoes or something like that, some orchard stuff. And so they'll trade in those 48050s to us and get the tires they need. Well, we can take those tires and the guy in Nebraska or maybe in Texas will need them. And we can help move tractors that way. And it takes a tractor and maybe one guy in 10 will be interested in it, and we open it up to 10 guys out of 10 being interested in that tractor.
And Eric, you and I have talked quite a bit about a various number of things, and talk about the importance of the used tire business to Dawson Tire.
Yeah, it's interesting how that business is really the evolution of the used tire and wheel business, Casey, because as our geographic footprint has expanded, we almost had a problem similar to some equipment dealers where our used tire and wheel inventory really grew. And so we really worked hard to expand getting a market for those used tires and wheels. I think the benefit of it is, I know in the equipment world, there's a lot of leases. John Deere's put a lot of leases into the marketplace to keep equipment moving, and those lease returns come back at, you know better than I do, but I think at 50% tread, they have to have some different tires on them.
Yep.
So it's really helped the equipment dealers that we've had 70, 80, 90% to new takeoffs that are a fair bit cheaper than buying new. So that's been one benefit. But then economically, everybody knows the ag commodity market hasn't been super wonderful the last few years, and it's been an opportunity for producers, growers to keep decent tires on their equipment at a discount.
Yeah, that's what I like about working with you guys is that there's a when I have a machine that comes in, it's got 5,000 hours on it or something like that, and it needs a new set of shoes on it. It makes a lot more sense to take that machine and put a pair of 70 or 85% takeoff, something like that, on that machine, just from the sheer economics of what you're doing. Especially when you start talking about four-wheel drives and you've got 8 tires that you're looking at, or it could be 12 tires that you're looking at, depending on if you got triples or what you're doing. But start putting a brand new set of tires all the way around something like that, you're going to get into some pretty heavy cash. In a lot of instances, it could be more than the tractor's worth, or it could be half of the value of tractors, so you're not going to get your bang for your buck. But if you take those used takeoffs and you get that price down, it does make more sense. So I love what you guys are doing with the used tire selection. I think it's great, and I think I'm glad you do it.
I think the other thing that's been good for us too is we really refined the process for how we trade and what we trade. And as I look at the quality of our used tires and wheels in the last 5 years has really, really improved. So, I know the inventory side from a cash perspective. We've got like $4 million worth of used tires and wheels sitting out there right now. Mm-hmm. But as you look at the quality of it, there wouldn't be anything, Nathan, under 70%, 65, 70% tread in any of it.
Yeah.
Right. Just knowing how to bring in a tire that still has use to somebody else.
Right. Yeah, it's a big deal. And like I said, it's a game changer when you start looking at remarketing used equipment and how that goes together, especially when you start talking about tires. And because from a pure aesthetics of the machine, right, the tires kind of tell the story. Yeah, you could have a machine that is completely mechanically sound, absolutely just immaculate in condition and everything else, but you got a pair of slicks on there for tires, and it just completely ruins the value. People can't get around that part. So, because it's expensive to change those tires out, and that's the biggest thing of it too. So, but good stuff there. So, well, this week you guys sent me over what you want to talk about, and tire technology's come a long ways, and there's about a million different things you can look at on a tire now to get you set up and ready to go, and different conditions require different kinds of tires and what have you. But you wanted to talk about IF and VF tires and the technology there and kind of where that industry is headed. So, Nathan, why don't you take that off and talk to us about the tire technologies out there?
I guess to start off with what they are, if a manufacturer decides to build an IF tire or a VF tire, there's a couple standards they have to meet. And
tell us what IF and VF stand for first.
Yep. IF stands for increased flexion. So just it's got more load carrying capacity, and a VF stands for very increased flexion. So an IF tire, what that means is it'll carry 20% more weight at the same air pressures as a standard tire, or you can drop the air pressure 20% and it carries the same weight as a standard tire. For a VF, that bumps up to 40%, so it'll carry an extra 20% more than an IF tire at the same air pressures as a standard tire.
I'm just used equipment, guys, so I'm kind of slow here a little bit, but they have if I understand you right, if I have the typical four-wheel drive tractor out there, and it's let's just say it's 50,000 pounds, and you're running that at 25 pounds or whatever that is, I could run that same tire at about 20 pounds of pressure with a VF tire, and that would give me a better footprint, and it would give me a little more traction in certain conditions, right?
Exactly right.
The reason that's important, Casey, and I think even in the last 3 years, I've noticed among producers a lot more attention being paid to compaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
When I started 22 years ago in the tire business, it wasn't something you talked about at all.
Yeah.
It was kind of black, round, and cheap. But as this machinery, as you know, has gotten immensely larger, heavier, and goes faster, and it seems that the producers that are staying in business, that are really getting ahead even in tougher times, are the guys that are dialing down the incremental costs, and they're paying attention to the little things that will give them 1 or 2 bushels more per acre. And a tire that you aren't maximizing the footprint on and managing your fuel costs that way, because if you reduce your, Nathan, you probably know the numbers better than I, but if you reduce your footprint or increase your footprint 20 to 30%, and reduce your slippage 10 to 15%, which is not at all uncommon, you're going to be saving 5 to 10 gallon of fuel a day, which is a big deal.
So you brought something up there. The weight of the machine and the speed of the machines have gotten bigger and faster. Talk about how these tires function in, say, let's say I have a row crop tractor and I've got a high-speed IVT transmission in it, and I can go, instead of going your typical 25 miles an hour, I'm going to be, up there in that closer to 30 miles an hour. How does that tire with decreased pressure and those kind of things, how does that work on the roading situation?
Yeah, so with the higher weight and higher speed, you still run a tire, say on a row crop tractor at 15 psi, and there is some central tire inflation system out there, but as we know, a lot of people will just want to run one psi, and so they don't have to worry about that. And they'll maybe check it 1 or 2 times a year and make sure it's still holding up. But the IF and VF would give that peace of mind that you can drop those air pressures 20 or 40% and still maintain the weight and the speed that you're trying to accomplish. Right
on. So that's a big deal now. It seems like roading equipment has gotten to be not that it wasn't beforehand, but as the operations get bigger and their areas of operation expand, the roading distance between fields seem to be getting further and further away, especially when you start talking about sprayers and those kind of things. How does a tire like this work with the sprayer, and is it something that you see as a common practice with a sprayer?
Yeah, what we found, especially on the bigger sprayers, a lot of manufacturers are putting them out, but like you take a new John Deere 4060 or 4044, 4060 comes with a 1,600 gallon tank, and out of the factory, they'll all come with an IF tire or a VF tire, especially on the row crop. Mm-hmm. As John Deere knows, that's the only way to make it work. It'll be a 40 mile an hour tire and rated for north of 13,000 pounds.
Yep.
Yeah, it's almost a requirement, Casey, that on this bigger equipment that they go with, the producers go with an IF or VF because of the weight, or you take some of those machines up to 30 mile an hour.
Yeah,
I laugh. I probably told you this story before, but talking about sprayers, that Vector machine, which is a direct axle machine built in Mississippi, that machine's rated to go 53 mile an hour. And you put that on a 380, 90, 46 or a set of floats, 650, 60 by 38. That's hell on tires, even empty.
That is a wicked amount of speed. I'm sure people are going 53 miles an hour with a full tank of liquid in the back there, and they're just screaming down the road, passing people in some of these rural roads and what have you. But that's a big factor, a part of these tires, and I'm guessing that's why the strength of these tires is getting to be such a bigger thing, is because the amount of weight that you have, plus the speed, plus just the overall, just the friction and the heat that you're generating going down the road with something like this. Talk about the lifespan of these tires and the technology that's built into them to kind of ward off that heat that we know exists as tires go down the road.
So Nathan could probably speak better to the manufacturing process, but what the tire manufacturers did when these loads increased and speed started increasing was really pay attention to sidewall design and construction. Mm-hmm. So it's not only, they didn't just thicken everything up. They actually put a lot of strength into the belt packages. So there's a lot. It's not necessarily thicker because they still need a lot of flexibility, but it's it's just the rubber compounds are better, and the belt packages, they started putting some different nylon in the belt packages so these sidewalls wouldn't break down and still maintain a lot of flex over a long period of time.
The technology in not just the tires, but the actual material that they're building them with have come a long ways from the old bias tires and everything else that we have out there. So that is a big deal. So Nathan, why don't you talk about just the manufacturing of these tires and what kind of goes into that?
Yeah, so a lot of the manufacturers, of course, they try to show you as little as possible. When you go through, went through the Firestone training facility in Columbia, Ohio, but they're getting a lot of technology themselves to build it as you can't put them together by hand and maintain the consistency from tire to tire. Their testing facility is, from what we were seeing, second to none, and they'll put a tire and just drive it for 6 months straight on autonomous tractors. But one thing you notice, or some of these tires, it seems like the sidewalls are as thin or thinner than a standard tire, and it's just that a lot better rubber compounds, synthetic now, and how they're gluing them together, all the testing that goes into it.
Another thing that's interesting, we go through some of the older standard tire plants in this country, and there's still some here, but the Goodyear plant in Des Moines has over 1,000 employees building tires. The Trelleborg plant that they've just recently put in, and it just shows the advances. I'm not picking on one or the other or saying one tire is better than the other, but the Trelleborg plant in South Carolina builds the same number of tires with 100 people.
Okay.
Just the robotics and even the artificial intelligence that's going into the machines that are building it, and as Nathan said, everything is so much more consistent. There's just no factor of human error.
So if I'm a producer out there right now and I'm listening to this podcast, which I hope everybody does, and I got some questions about my situation that I have. How are you going to walk through the kind of the checklist, I guess, of when do I need an IF and when do I need a VF tire?
Yeah, so we're going to start with what is your application? What are you doing with that tractor? What are you doing with that combine? We know what you're doing, but what does that combine? I'll pick on the combine because that's a world where there's a lot of producers miss it a lot with what tires and wheels are running. Am I running a 6 or 8 row head, or am I running a 40-foot platform? Do I road that combine with grain in it? I know we shouldn't, but do I? And just make them aware of what the weight they're doing. In a tractor, is it a drawbar pull or is it 3-point? So you have to understand what the weight is, and then the application. Are you row crop? Do you need to maintain ridges, or are you pulling 120-foot field cultivators with 4-wheel drives, and you just need to maximize footprint? So that's where we're going to start. Understanding what the tractor weighs, we'll actually pull some scales out and weigh it, and then start looking at what's the minimum air pressure you can run to perform most of what you're doing. Nathan referred to it earlier, but on the horizon is central inflation systems and equipment where you can change your air pressures from the cab. That's where it's going next, so you can actually pull into a field, drop your air pressures to 7 or 8, 10 PSI, and then pull out on the road and get them up to 25 or 30, which is where you need to run them, as you were referring to, at 30 mile an hour down the road.
So how does soil conditions and whether you're working on flat ground or whether you're working on a terraced field or your side hill or whatever it is, how does that start playing into which tire do I need when and how?
Yeah, one of the biggest things with lower air pressure is that the footprint of the tire, it gets a little bit wider, but it gets a lot longer, and so there's less just pressure on the ground. And the people that have done the test, the universities and a lot of producers themselves find that, especially row crop conditions, corn especially, but if you're running dual, you've got less PSI and more footprint, you're pinching the roots of the crop a lot less. You're putting a lot less pressure on. You're running, say, a 19-inch wide tire on 30-inch rows. That only leaves you 3 inches side that you're to go down between the rows. So a little bit of margin for error there, but it gets a lot better yield when you're not stunting a growth of the crop like that.
Yep.
The other thing is slippage, and you referred to soil conditions. The further east you go in this country, the wetter it typically is, and the more a tire flexes, the better it cleans.
Okay.
And the better it cleans, the less it slips. So we, again, just understanding that you can spend a little more money on a little better tire with IF or VF, drop your air pressures, reduce slippage. We saw last year, everybody knows it was kind of a year from hell for the weather, but we saw a lot of people buying flotation tires for sprayers that never ran them in the past. But then they're coming back this year saying, we want to keep doing that because we increased the ride. The ride is so much better. But we saw, even in wheat fields in western Kansas, I was talking to a dealer down there the other day, we saw that there wasn't the striping in the wheat from where the tire tracks ran. So they used to run just the narrow tires, and when they go through and spray, pre-emergence, that wheat was stunted. You could see it in the fields, but they eliminated that, and that's just an incremental yield improvement.
Yeah, that's the whole thing right there, is just making sure that you can increase that yield as much as you can. I mean, even if it's a bushel an acre, or whether it's 10 bushels an acre or whatever it is. I mean, the more you can do it, the better your profitability is going to be. So is the proverbial is the juice worth the squeeze type of thing. And in a lot of cases, tires are probably one of the most overlooked things. When we start talking about technology, we've got all this different stuff on the machines that can track yield and talk about, guidance and this, that, and the other thing. But there's still a lot of yield loss and gain in just your tires. And I think what you're talking about here is a good example of that.
And it carries through the year, doesn't it? No matter what machine you're running across the field, even in the fall and harvest time, you're impacting next year's crop by the compaction you're creating at harvest, and especially if it's a wet harvest or wet soil conditions during harvest. I'll go back to the combine situation. A lot of, we've seen in the past some people trying to cut costs, so they buy the lowest cost 520, 542 tire. But when you look at a 400 bushel grain tank today with a 12 row head and even a set of duals, those tires are actually carrying twice the weight that they're rated for. And so they continue to pump them up. When you run that tire at 35 to 40 PSI, you're just killing your soil. Right.
Plus, it's also the amount of pressure you're putting on that tire. It's not designed for that amount of pressure, and so your actual tire life is you're cutting it in half or more, and you might have to spend more money to get one of these IF or VF tires compared to your traditional tire. But in the long run, you're saving money because you're going to get twice the time out of this tire as you are the tire that you're not using properly. So this is it's a big deal. I had that conversation with folks quite a bit about, it might be more expensive, but you're going to get a longer life out of it. So I guess when you have that conversation with folks, how do you have that conversation with somebody? How do you have that, hey, look, this is how it's designed to be used, and this is how you're using it, and this is the expected lifespan, but you're above and beyond that. If you spend a little more money, you can get this tire. How do you have that conversation with a producer?
I think just like that, you try to take the time to understand what they're doing, again, with their piece of equipment, and just go through what is a load index? What does that 166A8 mean on the side of their tire? Because, back in the old days, was it an 8-ply or a 10-ply or a 12-ply? But today it's, there's load indexes, and you say, well, if you step up and buy this tire, it'll carry a little more weight, or you can carry the same weight with lower air pressure. We ask them questions like, is compaction something you pay attention to in your operation? Is that important to you? Well, most of them today will say yes. And then once you get on the footing of what's important in your operation, then it's easier to have the conversation rather than, is this one cheaper than this one?
Yeah.
As you know, in the world of sales, a lot of conversations start with price, and it's our job as the professionals, as the people that understand the tire and wheel industry, and hopefully something about agriculture, that we can transition the conversation to what's the best value for money. I mean, if it's your mowing tractor that you might put in the field twice a year because you're getting behind ridging, that's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's your principal tractor and you're putting 400 to 500 hours a year on it in field work, you have to stop and ask those questions, Casey.
Yeah, you got to ask questions.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's important. A lot of people are show me, don't tell me people.
Right.
And being able to pull out a scale, weigh a tractor with an implement. As we know, Western Nebraska uses a lot of 3-point setups, maybe more drawbar where you're at. But that's all weight that's going directly onto the tractor. So a lot of people will counterbalance the front end, put more weight on it. And being able to pull out a scale and scale that tractor. Then you show people what happens to footprint. There's a really easy footprint test where you can you just drive a tractor onto a piece of cardboard and spray paint around the tire, and do that a couple times with a higher air pressure and then with a lower air pressure, and you see how much longer that footprint really gets on the piece of cardboard. So it's an easy visual, and shows people what happens when you are able to do that with a tire.
Yep, that's technology has come a long ways in tires. And before we started the show here, you brought up a new one that I hadn't heard of yet, and it was the Galileo Cup tire. Am I saying that right? Yeah,
they call it the Galileo Cup wheel.
Oh,
I think they've marketed it to some under the new track name, the Mitos new track name. But again, it's a little different technology. We're doing some testing. Got actually running on a skid steer today. In our operation, so the same problem and maybe a little different solution. Even in our skid steers, where we would typically run 65 or 70 psi because we beat the crap out of them with a lot of weight, these tires are running 20 to 25, and just completely changed the ride of the machine, bouncing over ruts and frozen ground and rocks, and because that tire is flexing so much more. And it's hard to explain that it's a completely different sidewall technology. Still running some air in it. They do have some actual no air versions, but their goal was to, again, get another 20 to 30 to 40% footprint on the ground. So those tires are running around. They build some in like 710, 70, 42s. We've got some coming, but again, that tire just looks like it's running totally flat when it's on the machine, but the footprint is just massive.
Yeah, that's we're seeing more and more of these machines come out now that have a track system on it, whether it's a 2-track system or a 4-track system. Even some manufacturers have come out with, like Case, for example, where they've got a half-track kind of thing going, where they've got tires on the front, tracks on the back. You can tell that there's getting to be a bigger consciousness about not necessarily compaction, which is very important, but also just transport. You know what I'm talking about? So if you take like a 9RX or any articulated 4-wheel drive, or even a row crop tractor these days, and you put dual tires on it, and let's say it's a 4-wheel drive, and you put dual 710s or dual 800s on it, driving down the road, you're taking up a lot of the road, just driving down the road like that. But if you had a 4-track system, and you look at that, and you put that on there, you have a similar footprint. I mean, to some extent, you have a similar footprint. If you have 36 inch wide tracks, you've got 3 feet on the ground, and if you've got, but you've narrowed it up, right? So you don't have all the tires down the back. And I think something that I'm noticing with like the IF and the VF tires and those kind of things is that you're kind of the amount of tire that you have to have outside is starting to kind of shrink down a little bit. Is that kind of a fair statement? Is that something that you've noticed, and is that you think that's where this tire technology is headed?
Yeah, well, I think the tire manufacturers were a little bit threatened by the growth in the track industry. So what can we do to stay relevant? Some of the old standard American manufacturers, were building the same tires for 50 years, which they didn't keep up with the technology of the equipment manufacturers and the weight. I think that's a pretty fair statement. Probably the European manufacturers did a better job because they were a little bit on the front lines with roading. They do a lot more roading over there.
Right.
So I think, you've seen recently where the tire manufacturers are scrambling to get in the track business because of the growth of tracks. And again, the benefit of tracks is compaction and traction. Mm-hmm. Less compaction, more traction. Huge footprints on the ground. Little bit of challenge in the roading situation because the tracks in the past haven't stood the heat like a tire will. So we've seen some challenges in higher speeds and a lot of roading where the tracks are failing prematurely. But Michelin bought out Camso. Firestone scrambling hard to get tracks manufactured. They're supposed to have some Firestone tracks online here pretty quick. There's some out there now. I know. Yeah, other manufacturers looking at it. So it's obviously not going away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the track thing is going to be a bigger deal as machines get bigger and heavier, and we're looking for a more condensed footprint. Whether it's a tire like this with some similar tire technology that we see here, or whether it's some track system that we see out there, it feels like there's we're running out of road space, and machines are getting bigger, and we need to somehow make them more compact, but yet still be able to transport them in a more reasonable fashion. So, good stuff here, folks. I'd like to thank you guys for being on the podcast here. Any last things you want to throw out there about this stuff before we shut it down?
Well, I wanted to ask you real quick, Casey, what's your opinion on size of equipment? Is there a point where that you run out of, where's optimum size? I think it's been driven by labor and size of farms, but is there a time when the equipment's going to not keep getting bigger and bigger? I mean, John Deere can't even ship combines with wheels and tires on the same truck as the combine now because they're so big.
Yeah. I've had this conversation a lot with different folks, and in my opinion is I kind of feel like we've hit that point now. I would guess that every generation's had this conversation, like how much bigger could it possibly get, you know? But I mean, where we're sitting at now, I really think that we've kind of hit that point. I don't know how much bigger you can get, you know, a combine, or how much bigger you can get. I mean, there's everybody's rolling out a new generation of combine here in a couple years, and there's going to be some sizes that are going to be, you know, class 10 combines, and those kind of things are going to start being more prevalent, and what we see happening out there. I really believe as autonomy and you know, drone type situations start to pop up, machines will start to get smaller. Because you won't have the need for one person to go out there and operate one machine. You'll have one person operating however many, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 or however many machines they can monitor at a time. And when that starts happening, you'll start seeing more and more machines in a single field, and they're going to be smaller. So I definitely think that, you know, over the next 5 years, going and for sure the next 10 years, the size of machinery will get smaller before it gets bigger. Now, I'm no expert, and I don't have any kind of real information other than just a hunch that I have as I look at just kind of everything around us is getting smaller. Cars are getting smaller. You know, you just look around; things are just getting smaller, and I think just the overall, and it comes back to a labor thing, right? So when one person can operate multiple pieces of equipment at the same time, you'll see that, or you could have, you know, some technology out there where one tractor can operate 3 or 4 tractors at the same time. So someone's still in the tractor driving it, and they're still using guidance and what have you. But you'll have you know, one tractor out there driving and planting, and there'll be 2 other tractors and 2 other planters beside it that are doing that are just following that tractor down the field. So there could be some stuff like that. But as things get more robotic and more autonomous and more, you know, kind of driverless type technology starting to be more prevalent, I really believe equipment is going to get smaller.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's good. No, I appreciate you having us on. I don't really have anything more to add this morning.
No, that's.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys being a part of the podcast, and I look forward to this coming year and how we the stuff that we're doing here. So if folks want to reach out to Dawson Tire and Wheel and get some information about what it is you guys have to offer, and maybe just have a question about a tire that they're using, what's the best way to do that?
Simplest way is probably just call us. 888-604-3403 is the number, or you email us at sales@dawsontire.com.
Right on. And what's the website?
www.dawsontireandwheel.
Right on. Okay. And you're out there on all the social media sites as well, at Dawson Tire and Wheel, or at Dawson Tire, on about every social media platform out there. So guys, reach out, check them out. They got a lot of good information, and like I said, I've had the opportunity to work with these guys for some time now, and I'm really honored to have them as part of the podcast. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Nathan McPherson and Eric McPherson. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Move